позволю себе представить нашу компанию. Компания называется Blackboard. Она основана в 1997 году. И вы можете легко прочитать на нашем сайте. У нас около 1000 разработчиков, несколько сот миллионов долларов годовой оборот. Но не это самое главное. Это все формальные показатели. Самое главное, конечно, это понимать, зачем это было сделано, зачем это делалось. Так вот, смысл очень простой. Создавалась компания раньше и до сих пор служит единственной цели. Как сделать так, чтобы обучение в кампусе и обучение, скажем так, удаленное за пределами кампуса не сильно отличались по качеству. То есть вы можете сидеть здесь, в этой замечательной аудитории, вы можете быть где угодно, в самолете, вы можете путешествовать по Африке. Как сделать так, чтобы вы не чувствовали разницу? Чтобы знания не терялись с увеличением километров, с увеличением дистанции. В этом была главная цель, пожалуй, главная миссия компании Blackboard. Она достаточно успешно с этой миссией справляется. У нас очень хорошие показатели в развитых странах по количеству внедрений. То есть, порядка 70-80% в разных странах университетов используют компанию Blackboard. Меня зовут Денис Курамшин, я являюсь менеджером по странам СНГ. А сегодня у нас есть возможность послушать нашего коллегу, господина Рика Ван Сента. Рик Ван Сент работает в университетах очень много лет и занимает совершенно разные должности. Дошел от простого преподавателя до руководства университета в Абу-Даби и сосредоточил свою долгую жизнь, очень большой опыт, как организовывать образование. И сегодня тема нашей, скажем так, я надеюсь, все-таки, что не презентация, а дискуссии, как сделать университет более интернациональным. Поэтому прошу поприветствовать господина Рика Ван Сента.
Well, I guess I'm going to get a chance to talk to you in English. My understanding is that your language skills are much better than mine, and you'll be able to follow along. I am a little better than most Americans. I do speak fluent Spanish as well, but I'm afraid Russian eludes me. I had a few minutes with Sergey here as he toured me around the laboratory, and the first thing I thought of as we started was I'm not smart enough to be here. No question about it. This is the kind of high science and high intelligence and art that intimidates me after 35 years as a vice rector, as a dean. I'm still intimidated by being with people who are as smart as you all and your students. But my mission here today obviously isn't to talk to you about science, which is good for you all, because it would be a very strange lecture indeed. But what I am here to talk a little bit about today is this notion of internationalizing a university and what it really means. Now, my history is, I've been in education about 35 years, with the last 20 of them or so being in higher education. So I am a full tenured professor still today, and I've been a dean and a vice rector and such. But more importantly, in my work with Blackboard, which is the world's largest educational technology company, I get to do a lot of travel. And more importantly, as I travel, I get a chance often to talk to people and learn from you all about what's going on in your world, in your university. And I think one of the things that always amazes me and energizes me is how different education looks in all different parts of the world. I live in Abu Dhabi, in the United Arab Emirates, is my home. And the Arabian Peninsula and the Gulf region, fueled by oil money, is a place of a great explosion of effort around education. I say effort because their success is still a ways off, but their effort is rather enormous. Funding drives a lot of innovation, and one thing they have is funding. You've never seen a university till you've seen one of the big Saudi Arabian universities, 150,000 students, with a $11 billion campus built. These are things that are almost unimaginable for those of us who live in cramped quarters and little lab spaces, and we bang elbows with each other. But internationalizing a university is just part of a much larger question about what a university is today in the 21st century, in a digital world, in a global world, in a world that is connected in ways we never even envisioned possible before. So in the car driving over here, I got a WhatsApp from my daughter who's back in the United States. She's heading down to another city for some work. So I picked up the phone and I just called her. Think about that a moment. That's amazing. I'm in a car traveling through Moscow traffic, and I just picked up a call and called her as she sat on an airplane in the runway in Detroit, Michigan. It is a very different world. What does that mean for universities? Well, I know that you all have heard all the stories about, Gen X, Gen Y students and MOOCs and flipped classrooms and all of these supposed innovations. But what I can tell you is that students still learn the way students always learned. At the neurobiological level, learning happens when axons and dendrites make connections, form new neural networks, learning occurs. That hasn't changed. The fact that I live with one of these devices, practically embedded, to my ear, or to nowadays looking at it more, doesn't actually change the way we learn. What has changed is not so much how people learn, but what's changed is the way the world itself has now connected around technology. So we were having a brief conversation in one of the labs here. And so my question, for example, was, you have a strong partnership with Scripps University back in North America. What does that partnership look like? And I was told that you have people in residence here that were there. You have people come in and give lectures, probably standing right here. But the world today is about instant communication, instant collaboration, not waiting 4 months for somebody to come here for a week and fly 15 or 20 hours, killing themselves on an airplane to get here. Today's world looks very, very different. So let's talk for a few minutes about what internationalizing a university looks like. And I understand and I respect that you all have made great strides already. You've got a board, an international board of 11 members. Your 11th just being appointed, I guess, very recently from South Korea, headed up by the president of MIT. That's an amazing testimony there that he would do that. I know that your board members come from all over Europe and now Asia and North America. I do have to admit, though, that they all look like white old men. So, kind of look like me, I think, old, white. But, the face is differentiating, and as I look at this audience, obviously the future of science, the future of this institution itself will be very diverse. Okay. Here's a paradigm for you, okay? A world-class university must be internationalized. But being internationalized does not necessarily make you a world-class university. What's a world-class university? That's a bigger topic. But let's talk for a moment more about what internationalizing looks like. One, we have something we might call transnational education. You're delivering your education outside of the country. This is one method, one means of internationalization, is transnational. So when the professor from Scripps comes here, he's engaging in a transnational form of internationalizing. When one of you travel to Europe, North America, Asia, same kind of thing. Second, we have this concept of a multinational university. This is growing very rapidly. Do you know what the most selective university in the world is? The hardest university to get into? What's your guess? What do you think?
Harvard.
Harvard, that's a normal guess, and a very good one. What else?
Cambridge.
Pardon?
Cambridge.
Cambridge, another great guess. Probably thinking maybe Stanford, Caltech, or MIPT, right? Yeah, very hard to get in here. Actually, the hardest university in the world to get into is New York University Abu Dhabi campus. What? NYU created a campus under the sponsorship of the Sheikh of Abu Dhabi. And last year, for that campus, they had 15,000 applications for 87 slots. Why? 15,000 applications for 87 positions. Every student who applied had a 4.0 average. Every student who applied had top ACT and SAT scores. 15,000 from around the world. Why? Why so many for so few positions?
Because people like New York?
People like New York. That's, yes. I understand that. But this campus is in Abu Dhabi, hot as hell during the summer. Otherwise, a pretty nice place to live. The reason is, of course, it's an absolutely 100% free education, paid for completely by the government of Abu Dhabi, including a stipend or a subsidy for you to go to school, as well as your housing, as well as your round-trip airfare, as well as your complete education. That makes it a very attractive proposition. But what's happening is internationalizing Yale with a campus in Shanghai, NYU with an expansion, or do I have that backwards? Yale and Singapore, NYU moving into Shanghai, I think. What's happening now is also these multinational campuses that are springing up. That's another form of internationalization. And it's one of the aspects of competition that your university is going to have to deal with that didn't exist before. Because I will not be surprised if in the next 5 years we don't find one of the big dogs, as we call them in the US, decides that Moscow might be an appropriate target to take a look at opening a campus. More important is competition in terms of Harvard undergraduate business, for the first time ever, is now going online. What will that do to the business schools when you can now get a Harvard undergraduate business degree anywhere? Okay. Now, one way that this takes place is in this internationalization abroad, staff and students both directions. I don't know the extent of your partnership with somebody like Scripps or maybe some other university, but a lot of what this means is that things flow back and forth. Students study over there for a while, they study here for a while, there's an exchange of students, exchange of faculty. This is certainly one of the ways in which internationalization flows. The second one is the one most people don't think about as much. How do you internationalize right here at home? Now, in what we call the hard sciences, like you all are involved in here, that's in some ways less of an issue because science really isn't geographically or culturally defined. Okay, if we're studying business, if we're studying politics, it's going to be much more culturally and geographically defined. The politics and the business of Russia may not look like the politics and business. But genome sequencing, drug interactions, they don't care. Unless it happens to be a particular thing having to do with ethnicity of a Slavic-oriented population versus a Anglo-Saxon population, that may differentiate. But if you're in the business of drugs, you're in the business of all people, because that's your market space, okay? But it is important to understand that internationalization is not just about this notion of flowing people. It's the exposure to very different educational methodologies. So that when somebody from some other culture brings different practices in teaching and learning, and how you learn off of that, okay? And also those kinds of social interactions that spring up around it. And the understanding, I mean, you're in the hard science business here, but you get to stay alive only as long as at the end of your rainbow lies the pot of gold. Because just doing this for your own amusement, eventually somebody's going to quit putting up money for it. At some point, this is a business. The business of education is something, even in the most liberal of universities, still requires attention. So how do you attend to? So my question to you is, How are you taking care of this? How are you learning about teaching and learning? How are you learning about educating your students in a global world which is going to prepare your students to function in that global world? Okay? Global preparation is not something you find in a book. You can read Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. Great. That's a great place to start. But it's not going to prepare somebody to work in a totally global environment. Okay? So if you're working for a company like Johnson & Johnson's, which is all over the globe, you're interacting with people all over the globe, and it's not those cultural differences that we tend to think. It's the subtle stuff behind this. I've spent my life in training teachers, okay? What I did for much of my life is run education departments, train teachers, train faculty. I ran faculty development departments. And one of the hardest things was understanding how to work with faculty from different parts of the world who bring very different histories to this. If you come from the Middle East, what you know is how to stand up and deliver a lecture. Give 4 tests a year, and that's it. Yet today, and much of the Western world for sure, we talk about project-based learning. We talk about experiential learning. We talk about authentic learning, not stand and lecture and deliver, although that still certainly has its place. So what does it mean? What does an internationalized university mean? Well, the research would tell you this. I mean, these are not my inventions, okay? You know, this comes out of taking a look at the research that's out there. 1, it's an international mix of students. 2, an international mix of teaching and research staff. 3, a curriculum that is culturally independent where relevant. Probably not a problem for your type of curriculum. Domestic students that study abroad and return with those experiences. Second part's not there, but it needs to be, because the brain drain of Russia is quite significant. Okay? Now, that's not a political statement, that's just a factual statement. You lose a lot of your best people, as almost every country does. Okay? Including, surprisingly enough, North America, US, Canada. They lose some of their very best also. I believe you have some of them working right here. Okay, so it does go both ways. International collaborations in teaching and research that may involve business partners. Okay, and a continuous commitment to international development work. It's that commitment that ultimately sustains this. Okay. So what are the implications, which is really the whole point of this whole session? Okay, what are the implications? Let me tell you something. You're already well down the road. So I put up there, it takes 3 to 5 years. You all are well past that, well down the road, okay? But how do you do it more? How do you do it better? So it's not that you're not doing it. The appointing of an international board like that met in Zurich, I think in January, great step. The fact that you have, professors from all over the world coming and going is a testimony to your elite nature. But how do we move to the next level? Because no matter what university you are, Harvard or Cambridge, doesn't matter, there is a next level, believe me, okay? Because I have these conversations with those universities too. And every president, last one was the head of the Virginia Alliance of University and Colleges, the chancellor of a system, we had the exact same conversation, okay? How do we take this to the next level? Oops. It involves everyone, all curriculums affected, on-campus activities. Do you have an international education club? Do you have support systems for your international students? Do you have international students? Yeah, how do you support them intentionally? What systems have you built in your university to make sure that they're nurtured, sustained, taken care of, connected, and built to integrate into the fabric? How do you do that with faculty? We think adults don't need that. Wrong. I've moved around the world a lot, and there's no place lonelier than that first 6 months when you move in to a new culture. Okay? Global research partnerships, you have those going on. And, teaching partnerships at all levels. So we had a little bit of a conversation also, because this teaching partnerships is another piece when we talk about how do you move to the next level, which is, of course, what I'm interested in professionally, but it's also what I'm interested in as my job kind of thing. And that is just how your connections are built at a teaching level with the rest of the world. Again, if you have to wait 4 months for that professor to spend 20 hours on a jet aircraft, to land here to give some lectures, to work in the labs with you, you're missing 80% of the richness that comes from continuous interaction with them. You need to, and you probably do some of this. When you call that person, you probably call them by Skype. When you're setting up their trip, you're probably talking to them via Skype about their travel itinerary and what they need and the lectures that they'll give and all of these things. Yet when it comes to teaching, why aren't you using some of that same type of technology? Why aren't your students sitting in a classroom with the professor on a screen like this, with him looking at the class, with full synchronous communication, with good collaboration tools, with presentation mode, with all those tools that are now so readily available, plus all the material in a learning management system that students can access 24/7 anywhere, with collaboration with classes from that university and this university, so you're actually in the same groups, digitally online, working together. That's the next evolution. When you talk about that next step, that's the next step that's already here, because that's what you'll find in the best internationalized universities, is we've gone beyond the partnerships. We've gone beyond importing the teachers, exporting our students. We've gone beyond this kind of time and place shifting to a virtual reality in which that time and place almost has no meaning anymore, where we live in a continuous internationalized environment, much like if you came down to the UAE and you went to work for a pharmaceutical technology company in Dubai, your workplace would be 67 nationalities around you. Today, your learning experience ought to be much like that. Maybe not 67, but more. Okay. And I really wish this thing would quit turning itself off. Okay. So why do it? Why? I mean, you have a beautiful university. You're one of the most prestigious institutions in Russia. Why bother with all this stuff? Okay? Well, you must think it's important because you're here to listen to me, or else somebody told you you had to be here, in which case I'm sorry if it's not interesting. But why do it? Well, here are 3 reasons, okay, given by senior people in these countries. And I can track down the actual references if you need them. But in Australia, it's a major priority for our universities. It will remain so if Australia and its universities are to be internationally competitive and lay claim to quality education. Well, that sounds a bit to me like blah, blah, blah from a politician. But, okay. Second one's a little better. In the long run, those who can move seamlessly between different nations, cultures, and languages will be positioned to capitalize on the next scientific, technological, or information revolution. Now, I think we all know the joke about Americans. It says if you speak 3 languages, what are you? You're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, what are you? Bilingual. If you speak 1 language, what are you? American. Okay. It's true, by the way. Most Americans don't speak, except that America's no longer what America was. It's now 47% Hispanic, it's now 27% Asian, it's now, so that's diversifying. And here's one of the interesting things they're starting to do in universities, is they're starting to require, especially all of their technology graduates, to learn a foreign language. Why technology graduates? The language of programming is the language of programming. Well, because most education now and most work in technological fields is functioning on a 24-hour clock around the globe. That means you clock in at 8 o'clock here in Russia, You clock out at 5 o'clock here in Russia, and 8 hours west from here, somebody's logging in. And they'll work for 8 hours, and they'll log out, and 8 hours from there, somebody else is logging in, and by the time you come back to work the next day, 2 more work cycles have taken place. And you pick up the project with 2 days of advancement just by going home and going to bed and come back. And that's real today. That's how our company handles tech services. We have people in centers spread around the world, and no matter what time of day or night it is, if you log a help call, if you need some assistance, you're not going to get somebody at 1 o'clock in the morning here in Moscow. You're going to get somebody at 11 o'clock in Australia, or whatever the time zone is. Okay? That's the way this is all working today. So who are your graduates prepared for? Well, according to this, our head of education for the US government believes that this is critical. And in Canada, internationally, students are important to Canada's future. They make an enormous contribution to the academic endeavor, and over the long term, they become ambassadors for Canadians' trade and political interests abroad. Canada still has been for some time and is still one of the biggest silent threats to brain drain in the world. More people are migrating to Canada than any place else, and at a higher level of education than any place else, because Canada still has open arms to immigration. It's still probably the one country in the world that is easiest to immigrate into, especially if you have advanced educational credentials. And so while nobody's talking about it, nobody pays much attention to little old Canada, what they're developing is a real powerhouse of science, technology, pharmaceuticals, engineering, medicine, okay? And that's because of this kind of approach. So, why would you want to internationalize? Well, if we take a look at universities that are considered truly international universities and ask them about why, these are some of the results we get. Number 1 in ranking, increased national economic competitiveness. Now notice it said increased national economic, not increased international economic competition, but increased national. In other words, if I am more internationalized as a university, I compete better right here at home, is the belief set. 2, the development of strategic alliances, political, cultural, trade, academic. Presumably it's because those alliances translate into something, but they don't say. 3, building human resource capacity. Another vague phrase. 4, promote international solidarity and cooperation. That'd be nice if the world would play better together. I'm all for it, but haven't seen any improvement in that very much. Promote further cultural awareness and understanding. Okay. Strengthen an education export industry, and contribute to regional priorities and integration. Now there's some news today in the New York Times I'll tell you about in a couple of slides that's real interesting about this, especially about strengthen the educational export industry. So why do universities do it? Well, you can read that for yourself. I'm an educator, I'm a teacher trainer, I've been a teacher all my life. But I can't get away from the fact that I think so many people, okay, don't pay attention to the fact that universities are businesses. I think it's probably that one.
Next slide. This is about why nations go international.
Okay.
Switch on laptop. Yes. If you switch laptop.
Oh, sorry, let me go on. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, I was one off. I apologize. So why do universities do it? Whoa, come back here. Okay, try that. Okay. Diversification of income. Now, each university around the world is different. And a lot of universities are government funded, that's all they need to worry about, and they get their money from the government and nobody has to worry. Let me tell you something. The number of fully funded government institutions in the world in the last 5 years has decreased by something like 20%. In the Gulf region, the UAE, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, all of those countries, in the last 3 years have cut off complete government funding and have gone to a funding model that's based on FTE, full-time equivalency of students. Saudi, the largest funder of education anywhere in the world as a part of GDP, is currently looking at starting to hold their universities accountable for the budget they're given. Asia, there are a few universities there that are fully, completely funded, leaving China out of it, which A, I don't know that much about, and B, is a whole another kind of animal, are also starting to strip away these guaranteed funding sources from universities, and the universities are having to become more accountable by the day for their budget, and they're going to get more and more funded as a result of their FTE count. So let me take a look here. This is interesting. The London School of Economics. Where does their money come from? Now, the London School of Economics is one of the great universities of the world. It's certainly a world-class, world-ranked university. It serves as the model for economic-type universities worldwide. Okay? Look where their money comes from. Home students is less than the international students. Now, part of that is because international students pay a lot more. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. You're not going to go to the London School of Economics for the same amount as somebody who's, a natural UK citizen who lives in London. Part-time students, not so much. And of course, in my world, this is real important. Distance learning generates the highest level of revenue of all. Okay? Now, this actually crosses over a bit with this, but they're talking full-time face-to-face, full-time face-to-face, and students and online, okay? In fact, my boss just completed his master's degree at Cambridge in an online mode, just recently. Wasn't at London School of Economics, but Cambridge. Yeah.
Question is, without corporate training, only students?
I believe we're talking about sources of income relative only to full-time enrolled students, or part-time as indicated right there. But I believe that the research data is only about full-time enrolled students. Okay. Now, it's questionable about distance learning. I might agree with you. That could be part-time as well, but how they break this from this, I'm not sure. But the specific kinds of stuff where a company, is educating in a very narrow frame, my understanding is not. But I haven't gone to the source documents from which this was derived.
Just I know for business schools, it's one of the most important.
Yes, is those executive business programs. Yeah, I have very close contacts with INSEAD, who has a campus in Abu Dhabi, who has a campus in Singapore, who has their main campus in France, multi-campus again. And yeah, they survive only because of those corporate. Okay. So there are a couple of types of strategies. One is very university-centered, and the other is very student-centered. Okay? I think it's really clear I don't even like this division because I think what it has to be a truly international university, it has to be both. I don't know how you can be internationalizing the relationships of your students and their knowledge without having a full institutional commitment to this. Okay? So the literature divides this stuff. I'm just not sure I agree personally. Okay? Types of partnerships. You probably have a lot of these already, but in case you don't, here are the types of partnerships that tend to exist out there. Okay? Obviously, one-to-one staff teaching or research exchanges. That's the most common. A professor goes there, a professor comes here. We may even have an exchange situation for a semester. Students do a semester abroad. Okay. Small flows of master's and PhD students. Students gonna, go to this other university while still enrolled here. What's really emerging now are these 2+2 or 3+1 degrees. Now, do you have anything like that with any of your partnerships? Okay, these are really growing very strongly right now. 3+1 means a student, this is assuming a 4-year university degree. Students will spend 3 years here, 1 year wherever. In a 2+2 model, it's 2 years here, 2 years there. Students today, now 5 years ago, this didn't exist. But today, universities are offering dual degrees from both universities in this model. So a student who goes for 3 years to MIPT and 1 year to Scripps, let's say, might receive 2 diplomas. A diploma from here and a diploma from Scripps. Now this is one of the most powerful trends I think that's changing things. Because what student wouldn't want to have that luxury? I mean, I'd love to be able to trot out my PhD from Purdue University, but also bring out my PhD from, well, I'd say MIPT, but I don't think you teach in my field. So you know, an elite university, St. Petersburg, okay? Wouldn't that be wonderful, depending on where I was in the world, to leverage the best diploma for the circumstances? The university I was last at Abu Dhabi University in the capital of UAE, we had a partnership in the business college with Tufts University. We had a 3+1 degree program, and that one could be handled virtually if needed. Although most students chose to go to the States for a year, it could be handled virtually, and they were now coming, the first graduating classes this year, and they will now come out with an Abu Dhabi University degree, which is going to be well respected and known in the Gulf region, but on top of it, they'll have a US degree from a reasonably good business school, okay? Different ideas about things are popping up. The advantage, of course, why would a Tufts University engage with Abu Dhabi University? Revenue, money. It's no more simple than that, although we're going to talk about internationalization and, you know, intercultural opportunities and all these wonderful things. At the end of the day, those things influence rankings. Rankings relate to income very clearly. The better your ranking, the better position you're in, for all sorts of, you know, not just enrollment of students, but partnerships, et cetera. Okay. So how do universities decide to work with you? Okay. Assuming I'm on the correct slide here. One, they have shared values. So, are they interested in the same things you're interested in? Okay. So if you went and sought a partnership with a liberal arts undergraduate university, that probably wouldn't make much sense. If you went and sought a partnership with Johns Hopkins or Scripps as you have, or Caltech or something, you're going to resemble each other a lot more. You're going to share very much core values around that. Your national, international reputation. And this one's interesting that it comes up kind of number 3. So we don't often talk about this. But universities want to partner with other universities where the university leaders have the authority to make decisions. I can speak from experience, working in a partnership with Vietnam from North America, that it took us 5 years to build a partnership that should have taken 5 months, because everything had to be approved by the ministry level people. Every ministry level person was always looking to see what was in it for them. And I'm not talking just bribes or anything quite so obvious, but rather everybody wanted to know how they could get some of this. So what should have been 5 months for a fairly simple type of program took us almost 5 years to get this dual master's. It was a 3+1 degree type of thing, with the one being fully online. And because the institutions and universities did not have that kind of autonomy and authority to consummate those kinds of relationships themselves. Okay, so You can see the rest. Yeah. I highlighted, of course, the technology need learning because what we do, but that is a core piece. Relationships and shared partnerships. Okay, if I go to almost any university website, pick out almost any university in the world that you know about, go to their main website, they will list anywhere from 10 to 50 memorandums of understandings, partnerships with universities. If I go to any of these universities and I take the list and I take the first 20 partnerships that they list on their website, how many of those do you think actually mean anything or actually doing anything? What do you think?
One.
Yeah, that's about right, 1 or 2. Okay, because we sign these MOUs so we can put the logo on our webpage so we can claim we're an international university. But if you look, we had one professor exchange 4 years ago, and that was it. Okay. What's got to be real is this full-time engagement where it becomes built into the fabric, the way in which your university functions. It cannot be simply something that you have the Office of International Cooperation. And that office over there has a wonderful, staff member who processes paperwork and such. What it's got to be is built into the way you teach and learn continuously so that every professor, every student has this kind of interaction and opportunity, and that's only available when you bring the digital medium of communication and teaching and learning into the fabric of the way your university functions. Okay. And last, because by now you should be tired of listening to me, okay, because the average human attention span is 10 minutes. That's it, 10 minutes, and most of us don't even have a 10-minute human attention span. Now, before I wrap up, let me explain that statement. 10-minute human attention span doesn't mean you can't listen to an interesting lecture for 50 minutes. What it means is if I sent you out there on the street and said, I want you to count every white four-door car that comes by, you might last at a maximum 10 minutes. Guess is usually around 3 to 5 minutes, you'll start missing cars going by. Your human attention span is not very long, which is why lectures are a dangerous way to teach, okay? Because we tend to go fishing. How many of you all during this 20 minutes, whatever it's been, have already started thinking about things you have to do when you get home tonight? The work that's sitting on your desk while you're sitting here going, I wish I could go back to my emails because I know they're stacking up. I mean, we're real. Let's be human. I mean, it's human attention span, okay? So, to wrap up and get out of your face, okay. Internationalization is one route to being world class, but you need to know why. You must understand your strategy. These strategic partnerships are at the heart and soul of this. You have to have a strong technological background, okay, foundation, and I know you've got some of the world's probably best programmers and stuff running around here, but is that where they need to waste their time? Or they should be busy sequencing the human genome or whatever it is that they do, okay? High proportion of MOUs never bring results. Consider what type of partnerships you want. Okay. So here's my one pitch, okay? It's true. Okay, but the important one is up top. All international universities have very serious e-learning capabilities. Yeah. So this isn't a sales pitch. I'm not really trying to sell you Blackboard. But the point being, what I am trying to sell you on is the concept of moving your teaching and learning into a digital sphere, a digital strata that will allow you to move forward in a meaningful way with this move to internationalization. That's not a matter of signing MOUs that never get exercised, and it's not about the huge costs involved in flying a single faculty member back and forth across the world, but rather, how do you build this so it is a 24/7 living, breathing environment, geographically accessible from anywhere in the world, in which your university functions not only physically, but digitally. You can't replace the physical part. I mean, I'm not talking about that. These offices and lab equipment and people and conversations around a cup of coffee have to stay. But there is another dimension to it now. Okay. There are lots of partners that can help you. We'd love to be one of yours, but that's all I've got. Questions? Be happy to answer any questions if you're not too bored yet. Please.
What do you think, really, that these international universities are only possible in English-speaking countries or not? United States, Canada, their universities are really international.
Right.
But if you take German, Swiss,
They're getting there. They're getting there.
in China, it's really not.
China's not, but they're starting to turn. I mean, we have a subsidiary in China, and in the last year, they've started having their first conversations around this. And the first Chinese universities have acquired our platform for the explicit purpose of distance teaching and learning with external faculty. Now, as far as the language barrier, all I can say to you is I'm sorry. I mean, I think English is not the most beautiful of languages out there. I don't even think it's the most efficient language out there. It's a mixture of a whole bunch of other languages. It's often rather imprecise. But it's, as we say, the train has left the station. English is the language of business and technology, and therefore it is currently the language that is driving most of this. 82% of all publications are still in English or whatever. 75% of the internet is still in English, you know, whatever. But I think what's very possible is take a look first within your own country level and within other countries where Russian is spoken to start to expand this real-time interaction, this real-time kind of sharing. Then with selected types of courses and programs, start to move into the Western and Asian theaters, okay, to look for that. So it's all, I think, again, about being purposeful. It is true, English is a barrier to much of this. But again, remember, we now have, you've got tools on your computers that will do a pretty decent job of instantaneously translating anything in the written language, from any language to any language. Yeah, I mean, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty strong. Today, I do a lot of discussions with people. This is rare. I don't actually have a simultaneous translator with me for this conversation because you all apparently speak English well enough, or probably as well as I do in many cases. Thank you. So I think, again, you start to look at, if you want to take this down to the basic level, what would it cost you to have a translator on staff that was sitting next to you in a virtual classroom, as opposed to the cost of flying that professor halfway around the world? Which one would cost you less? I mean, so there are ways to solve some of those problems, especially using technology, where again, the technology can translate most everything. Now, the best solution? Yeah, it's an Englishizing of the world that I'm not so fond of. I was born in Panama, raised in Mexico City, so Spanish was my first language. But I love Spanish, because I think it's the most beautiful of languages. But it's not to be. Spanish exists in some large chunks of the world, but if you go into a university in Mexico or down in Chile or Peru, you're going to find a whole lot of English speaking going on, like it or not. Thanks for starting me off with a really bad question. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. No. Yes, please.
This is kind of short lecture about so-called economics of education, the same way as economics of welfare. And so, here you speak about economics of education in terms of distance learning, and you gave us the graph from London School of Economics that distance learning got you much bigger revenues than kind of other types of learning. But have you tried to research it for different areas of education? Because for example, for business, yes, it can be that kind of effect. But for different types of education, like physics, mathematics.
Right.
It may not be, true, say, it may not hold true.
Right.
In some areas you can earn more profits by distance
Okay.
learning, but in other areas you probably wouldn't be able to do it so easily.
So-
what kind of patterns do you see in these areas?
Well, her question is asking about, some of these things that I talked about true in all of the discipline areas. So I threw up the numbers for London School of Economics. Are these numbers likely to be true in different kind of disciplinary areas, different types of universities? Will this kind of move into distance learning and digital learning also hold true for biopharmacology as it might for, history or whatever? The answer is this. There are all types of universities in all places in the world successfully using a blended or digitally enhanced version of learning. For fully online instruction, I think your question is a great one because I think the answer is no. It's not the same in each discipline. But what I would say is it's less by discipline than by individual course. Okay? So if we took a senior seminar, your most advanced students, and what we were doing in that seminar was discussing the social, political, and human ramifications of extending lifespan. And that in this seminar, we were dealing with case studies, we were dealing with political agendas, we were dealing with legislation, we were dealing with medical costs, all these things that would be impacted by extending the average human lifespan, which is research that we all think sounds wonderful. Wouldn't it be great to extend the human lifespan in a healthy manner? But can you imagine the implications? That would be a fabulous course to do in a digital sphere, where people could discuss, communicate. That can take place very easily. Although some of the classes you do where you need lab equipment, that's not going to work quite so well, is it? Although virtual labs are improving all the time. A lot of early education, first-year education in biology and chemistry, is now taking place in virtual laboratories rather than real physical laboratories. Because you're running the same kinds of experiments that every student's run for the last 40 years, learning the basics of chemical interactions or certain biological principles or table of periodic elements or whatever it is that you're doing at this foundation level. Those lend themselves well to virtual classrooms and virtual labs. It's as you get into hands-on learning, authentic learning, okay, that I think you're right. Those are probably not great places to bring this. So I'm not advocating that as you move, that you internationalize all of your curriculum. I'm not suggesting that you interact in every classroom with people outside. I'm not suggesting all or nothing on anything. Your question's great, but I can point you to universities. Johns Hopkins Medical School is one of the elite medical schools in the world, and they are heavy users of digitally enhanced learning and blended learning. So a lot of what takes place in the digital universe is not even virtual learning, but the enhancement of face-to-face learning. So that I have every lecture that you give, I have all the results of all the tests, lab experiments and stuff, all there all the time for me to review, for me to look at, for me to go back. The more sophisticated systems will even index by word what was recorded in a lecture, give you a frequency of word count, give you an index so that I can go in and select the word, mitochondria, and it will immediately locate within the video in the lecture where that word was used. I mean, we have tremendous systems out there today that can do that kind of technological enhancement, not to replace face-to-face learning, but to build out on it so that the student's just not lugging their textbook home and sitting there with a book or having to go through their notes. So that's our experience with that. And if, when we work as a partner with various universities, we often get that question. And I mentioned Johns Hopkins because I've got a medical school in Italy that's just coming online, brand new, going to be the state of the art for Rome and all of the country. And their first question was, who can you point me to to show me what they're doing that we need to be like? And the answer was Johns Hopkins. So they flew out there actually 3 weeks ago and spent a week at Johns Hopkins really looking at how all that works. So great question, Bob. See, this is where I get to learn, by your questions. This is the cool part, because now I'll take your question actually, and next time I'm talking with another university, I will probably answer that question without it being asked. So thank you. What else? Yeah.
Quick question, maybe not so quick. By talking about the Skype versus face-to-face lectures, for example, as you raised, or also a point about autonomy of the universities. And given that a lot of universities, as you mentioned, actually have government funding, there is also a lot of KPIs and specific deliverables that are requested by government agencies for that.
Always.
And so having a professor visiting and being actually physically present is understandable by the government, right?
I know where you're going with this.
Right, the educational platform that is online,
Right.
You hardly can have this specific deliverables that will be recognized by the government agency,
Right.
so to speak, right? And from your experience, you're talking about Vietnam actually case, right? 5 years it actually came to establish this. How can we actually improve that?
Okay, so here's I've not had this conversation with your Minister of Education, okay? But here's what I can tell you in general around the world. Everywhere, people are accountable to somebody. Almost all universities somewhere in the world are accredited by somebody, and that accreditation requires certain sets of evidence and proof that say, here's what we're doing, and I can prove that we're doing what we're doing. Hope that's not me. Is that me? Okay. And therefore, how do we manage that in a virtual sphere? Now, I will tell you, I've been in and out of Abu Dhabi, for example, out of the UAE for 14 years. Okay, I was there 3, left, came back and been there 4. 3 months ago, they approved the accreditation and authorization of the very first online degree. And we've been working on that for 10 years, okay? Where you start is but having said that, I have not seen a set of ministry standards or accreditation standards that dictate instructional methodology yet. What they dictate is typically outcomes. So you said you're going to do this in your program. These are the outcomes for your program. Prove to me that your students are actually coming out of here capable and competent in doing these things. They may also have other requirements, X number of hours doing this, X number of credits doing that. You've got certain number of years it has to be done in. You've got, there are other kinds of parameters around that. But accreditation and validation always comes down to the same kind of core elements. How do you prove that you're doing what you say you're doing? And in this way, actually, digitally enhanced learning makes it easier, because now I've got statistics and numbers on every interaction students have with the course material. I've got videos of the professor's lectures. I've got all of that contained in a digital space. And if you want proof, I can give you better proof, because I can show you the actual lecture. I can show you how many students logged in. I can show you how long the students spent watching that thing. I can show you how they performed on that quiz specifically related to that lecture. I can show you how students performed on the remediation quiz after they studied the materials provided by the lecturer before and went back and reviewed it. I can break this down in analytic form to all sorts of data. I can drown you in data, in fact, on learning experience. But where you start is, like all good projects, you start small and you build from there. So you begin to think about not taking a program fully online. That would probably be wrong, okay? But you start thinking about, okay, in our program, as she said, which courses would really benefit from having a really good digital component? Which courses would really benefit from having really 24/7, 365, anywhere in the world kind of access to materials? Which courses can I use some colleagues' lectures from Exeter, from Pengyang University, from Scripps, from wherever, in my classroom? Which classrooms can I invite guest lecturers and use them to enhance the education? You know, teachers love to teach. You find an article, a publication of a professor that you think, wow, this would be really great, and you call them, send them an email. 9 out of 10 times, they'll be happy to get on Collaborate, Skype, WebEx, whatever, and deliver, you know, that kind of thing. The ministries typically don't intrude as far as classroom level methodology of instruction. Now, if your ministry is different and they send inspectors out to sit in your classrooms, that's different, but I haven't seen that yet.
It's more about actually funding.
Right.
Like, you actually spend money, right? So if you invite a professor, you spend more money.
Right.
You still spend some money actually to engage him into delivering
Right.
the lecture, right? And being him somewhere outside in a foreign country, delivering the content online, that's where it gets tricky in terms of like how the ministry will actually accept that whether or not it's an appropriate
Right.
standard, right?
Well, I can tell you that some of that goes on with universities here in Russia. So how they're justifying it, maybe they're not admitting that the person didn't come in person, I don't know, you know. Maybe some of our more senior people here at the institution will have some answers for that. I've not seen it be a barrier in terms of accountability for funding. You know, so if you needed to pay that professor to deliver that hour lecture, as opposed to paying them to fly and their airplane costs and their hotel costs and their per diem costs to come, I've not seen anybody say, whoa, you need to go spend more money. You know, this is too cheap. I haven't seen that yet, but I suppose some ministry accountant could have a problem understanding that. I think the world has evolved enough today that the idea of digital learning is not a mystery. Now, you know, ministries are not yet ready to accredit fully online programs. They're not ready to stamp online degrees. That's a struggle in part of the world today. But as far as internal workings of classroom and relationships and partnerships, I've not seen or heard of anybody with that problem yet. It's the best answer I can give you, honestly. Other questions? You gonna let me off that easy with all of this? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Now you can go back to your microscopes, computers, emails. Okay. Yes. I think on average we probably all get about 50 an hour. Is that right? But thank you very much.